coaching is not the only industry that suffers from comparison, but I think it's worse personally to feel in the coaching industry because it feels so personal, right? Like you're coaching, it's about you, and you're coaching when it's actually about the clients. We'll talk about that in another podcast. But the one thing that I did is like I falsely thought like the comparison, like I used to compare myself to other successful coaches and think, oh yeah, I can totally do that. Like that's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna try to get their results and replicate their results that they're getting without understanding like I'm not in the same place. It wasn't as much the frustration of seeing other coaches get successes. It was more like the frustrating belief that of course I could do that, and then not being able to do it. Right. So it's like there's like a version of comparisons like I compare myself unduly. Like I shouldn't have been comparing myself with their level of success and their business background and their knowledge and all the things that they're doing for the same reasons that $5 stock. Maybe they have a list, maybe they have a marketing, background, maybe they have a coaching background, maybe they have a business background. I don't know anything about that. So I just didn't know what I didn't know, and I didn't know that I didn't know what I didn't know. And that was the easy way to compare. It's easy to compare myself to the world's best when I don't know what they know, and I don't know that I don't know as much, right?
Yeah.
And so like there's lots of versions of this, but there's a version of it that can be really powerfully beneficial too, which is the version of like, wow, that's cool. I like that as part of my vision. I'm gonna go about figuring out what version of that I want to create for myself, and then go about figuring out what skills I need and be more intentional with planning and figuring out what are the pieces of the puzzle that I need to learn, and like going with that humility that I need to learn and I need to grow. And there's a journey here, and especially in coaching with like every skill set is a journey. It's not like there's one skill set you just like learn in 5 minutes. It's like all of it is a journey. And so going with that humble, everything's a journey. And at every level, like even today, after 10 years in the industry, I still feel like I'm learning every day. And there's still like a lot of times where I feel like there's a comparison happening in the back of my head. And I've recognized those thoughts now way more than I used to. And it still happens for sure. But part of it is like noticing that and being like, okay, what's the part of that comparison that's beneficial to me as a coach? And what's the part of it that's not beneficial? Because as long as I'm beating myself up for not having something or for not being able to do it or replicate or do whatever, if I'm beating myself up, I'm creating, headwinds against my progress. Instead, I can use it as inspiration or as, curiosity to find out more about how I could do that or how that does or doesn't apply to me. And that's a much better frame for a coach than to just get stuck in that comparison trap.
Yeah, for sure. And you mentioned something that's really powerful in there is that now you recognize those thoughts a lot more. And that's the problem, that when you're new in an industry or in an environment, it's very easy for your thoughts to take over. And I think this is where coaches might have skill sets that will help you. So if you have done coaching to a certain degree, and something similar to this happens in our coaching session. So for example, you're listening to a client, here comes the monkey in your head, and the monkey starts to judge the clients. Your thoughts will start to, or you will feel that it's about to go in that area. If you can catch the thought, you can put a pause on it. If you cannot catch the thought, then you become the thought in that moment. It's such a subtle thing to go from that. And here's what happens. And I've seen this so many times. I've seen this in my own calls. I've seen this observing other coaches' calls. As soon as they're taken over by that judgment thought, it's so obvious to everybody, but except to themselves. It's obvious to the client. It's obvious to anybody observing, but it's not obvious to them. And the same thing happens in the comparison world, is that if you can catch the thought, because all it is a thought, is that you watch that and you translate and you add a meaning to it, and then you say, you know what, I'm comparing myself. You're not. Your mind is comparing. And a lot of people look at that as a negative thing. I think that's a normal function of the human mind. There's nothing wrong with you. If your mind didn't compare you to other people, you would never get context, never understand frame of reference. Of course, you're going to compare yourself to somebody ahead, or your mind will, more accurately. So just as a starting point, I think coaches have the skill set to catch that, or you can actually, and that will make you a better coach, because, okay, so my mind is starting to compare me to this person. In what way? Am I inspired? Am I comparing? I should be there, or maybe I should have all the skill sets that this experienced coach has developed to get to where he or she is. It's unreasonable when you start to question it. You're like, that none of that makes any sense. But then if you're taken over by that thought, then your emotions join with it, and all of a sudden you go into this rut. And then what happens? You get in your head, and then you forget, or you get burnt out, or you start to be like, well, I should have all that. Let me go do market myself in that way, or let me go do the thing that coach is doing, which will not work for you. Because that coach has a completely different system. They have experience and skill sets, things that you haven't worked on. So just as a starting point, paying attention to that thought, and also understanding what we said, that always remember context. Everybody's life is so different. And I actually learned this not from the coaching world, I learned it from investors. When I started working with investors, a lot of these guys are capital raisers. So I saw their social media posting, I saw them in different groups, and then they would come to the coaching call with me. And then we would go deeper into their life. And when I would go deeper, I'd be like, if all those people who saw those posts knew all the things that were happening in their life, they would never say, I wish I had this person's life. They'd be like, you keep your problem, I'll keep mine.
I love that. And that reminds me of a couple things. And there's a saying, comparison is the thief of joy. There could be another side of that, which is comparison is a seed of hope if you do it in a certain way.